Sally Field has spent decades being admired for her talent, warmth, and emotional honesty on screen, so whenever headlines hint at topless photos that shocked everyone, the real story is usually less about scandal and more about how fame, privacy, and public expectations collide. Field rose to prominence as America's sweetheart, first through light-hearted television roles and later through deeply serious, award-winning performances that showed remarkable range. Because of that wholesome image, any moment framed by tabloids as shocking tends to get exaggerated, stripped of context, and repackaged for attention. In reality, when images or scenes from an actor's past resurface, they are often tied to artistic projects, changing cultural standards, or personal choices made during periods of experimentation and growth. For performers of Field's generation, the 1960s and 1970s were a time when Hollywood itself was redefining boundaries, with filmmakers pushing realism and authenticity in ways that sometimes challenged conservative audiences. What might once have been seen as daring or controversial is often quite restrained by today's standards, yet the language around it remains sensational because it grabs clicks. Field herself has consistently emphasized that her career was never about provocation but about storytelling, emotional truth, and portraying women as fully human rather than decorative figures. The persistence of headlines focusing on bodies instead of body of work says more about media habits than about the actress. Rather than lingering on the idea of shocking photos, many fans and critics argue it's more meaningful to look at how Field navigated Hollywood as a young woman, later asserting control over her roles and becoming an outspoken advocate for authenticity and self-respect. Her performances in films like Norma Rae, Places in the Heart, and Steel Magnolias reshaped perceptions of what leading women could do on screen, earning her Oscars and lasting respect. When moments from her past are isolated and reframed as scandal, they often ignore the broader arc of a career built on courage, discipline, and emotional intelligence. In that sense, the so-called shock fades quickly, replaced by a deeper appreciation for an artist who grew up in public, made her own choices, and refused to be boxed into a single image. For audiences today, revisiting these stories can be an opportunity to reflect on how society treats women in the spotlight, how standards evolve, and why genuine talent ultimately outlasts fleeting controversy. Sally Field has long been celebrated for her remarkable talent, emotional depth, and ability to connect with audiences, which is why sensational headlines about topless photos that shocked everyone often feel misleading and exaggerated. Throughout her career, Field built an image rooted in authenticity rather than provocation, moving gracefully from light television roles into powerful, award-winning film performances. Any moments from her past that are framed as shocking are usually taken out of artistic or historical context, reflecting shifting cultural standards rather than deliberate attempts to create scandal. During the era when many of these stories originate, Hollywood itself was experimenting with realism and breaking old taboos, and actors were navigating new creative freedoms.